Welcome to another episode of the Chiro Hustle podcast. This is episode 274, and we're both coming in from the beautiful state of Colorado today. I got Dr. Samuel Shay coming in from the Front Range, Boulder, Colorado, and Luke and I are coming in from the Western Slope, which is over here in beautiful Grand Junction. And before we jump into this amazing episode of the Chiro Hustle podcast, I want to give you a warm welcome, Dr. Sam Shay.
Thank you. It's good to see you, Jim. Good to see you, Luke.
Yeah. I know you said you've done a lot of media appearances on other podcasts and whatnot, so we're really happy to have you on our show.
Yeah, I'm quite I love education. I love teaching. I love sharing content that people find very valuable and actionable. And at heart, I'm a teacher at heart, but a clinician by training. And I just I feel the best when I'm able to share really great information with everyone. And the podcasts and summits and interviews are on current social media outlets. It's like the fastest way to scale content to everyone that wants to hear it.
Well, before we jump into your chiropractic story, I want to send a big shout out to Dr. Thaddeus Gala for bringing us together and putting us in the same room to where we could start masterminding together. So, Dr. Thaddeus, thank you for bringing Sam and I together. And with that being said, our first question that I'm really always excited to ask people is, what is your chiropractic story? And I read your bio, but maybe a lot of people don't know that snapshot story about what your chiropractic message is. But what got you into this profession?
Well, the irony is that even though I do, primarily functional medicine at this point, what got me into the profession was, of all things, low back pain. And I know, kind of anticlimactic, I know, and a bit cliche and ironic, but that's what it was, low back pain. I had a swimming accident when I was in high school. We were we were competing at a different school's pool, and this pool was so stupidly designed, couldn't they had these like mounted raised starting blocks that were high up, but they didn't tell us that the mounting blocks were at the shallow end of the pool. So if you did too deep a dive off these raised diving boards, you were going to face plant into the bottom of the pool. And they didn't give us any time to practice in the pool or check or anything. It's just like, get on the block and go. I did a dive that was a bit too deep, which is, yeah, partly on me, partly they could have freaking warned us that there was a shallow end. And I saw my face was about to face plant on the shallow end of this pool. And I quickly pushed my hands down on the shallow end, the floor of the pool, and basically jackknifed my spine up and just hinged right at T12L1. And that, as opposed to face planting, and that created a wicked amount of back pain. And that's when I went to go see my father and stepmother's chiropractor, Dr. David Newton, in I believe it's Lexington, Massachusetts. And I think he's like license number 80 something in Massachusetts. Like, he's been practicing for decades. And he combined SOT, AK, and activator into his own unique system. And it wasn't just like, lay prone, lay face up, adjust. He had something like 30 or something different positions he'd have his patients be in, because he saw that the spine was aligning and getting into patterns of distortion based on the different positions people were in: sitting, standing, stepping up, stepping down, etc. He had over 30 different physical positions he would test people in. And then I got very interested in natural medicine, given that I was also very sickly as a child, starting at age 6. I mean, this accident happened in high school, but I had been very unwell for the decade prior, with severe insomnia, really bad digestive issues, very high stress, anxiety, depression. I was in other pain from a lot of violence at school, from the injuries there that students and the teachers and the faculty and the community and didn't really take seriously what the abuse was going on at school. And so I developed, I had a lot of chronic issues going on, and Uh, I also had two addictions doing to cope with all the violence and the emotional abuse that was happening. Addictions to video game, addictions to sugar. And in high school, I decided to take charge of my own health and my own life. And I read so I was seeing Dr. Newton for adjustments. And then I read Dr. Jensen's Guide to Better Bowel Care, who, if people don't know, Jensen was a naturopath, a chiropractor, and a PhD. And he's considered one of the patriarchs of Western naturopathy, at least in the United States. And that book really got me on the trajectory to really be inspired to go pursue and study natural medicine. I also had a mentor later in high school named Eliza Bergeson, who I still speak with every 2 weeks today. And she also helped me kind of realize that I can be in charge of my own thought process. I can, help heal my own body, heal the emotional wounds, and take personal responsibility as opposed to looking for people to blame. And from all of those three influences, Eliza, Dr. Newton, and in spirit, Dr. Jensen, through his books, I went on to college to study pre-med and a holistic health separate degree on the side, aside from pre-med, in order to become a naturopath. And so why am I a chiropractor? Well, back in the early 2000s, the licensing of different licensing in different states was very limited for naturopathy. But it wasn't for chiropractic. Chiropractic was in all 50 states. Naturopathy was in, I don't know, at the time, like a dozen and a half. And I want to have my options open. And I realized that the states where both naturopathy was licensed and chiropractic was licensed, pretty much the chiropractors had the exact same scope as naturopaths in those states. They had kind of the broad scope that naturopaths did when the states that were licensed. Is that 100% true for all the states? No, but it was close enough. So I decided to keep my options open. I go to chiropractic school thinking I would come back and study with Dr. Newton. And I went to Parker, which at the time was called Parker College of Chiropractic. Now it's called Parker University because they've got at least one master's degree they offer. And when I was there, I met Dr. John D'Onofrio. I met him in Tri-1. And that man influenced me more than any other chiropractor I've ever met. And he's, for people that don't know Dr. D'Onofrio, I mean, he unfortunately passed 3.5 years ago. And if people want to know who he was like as a person, you can go onto YouTube and put in Dr. D'Onofrio, Donofrio, and you'll see my 13-minute in memoriam video, which I set to his 3 favorite Grateful Dead songs, and put pictures of him, his wife, his friends, his students, his colleagues, people's eulogies to him, and you'll be able to see Dr. D'Onofrio, or as I called him, Uncle John. He called me nephew. We're not blood, but he was Sicilian. So when you're in the quote family, you're family. And I just want people to see him through my eyes and the eyes of his other students and friends. And what made Uncle John unique was that he was one of the few people that carried the deep philosophy of chiropractic and the expansive science of neurology and nutrition. So just to give an understanding, he went to Penn State when it was still around. He was trained by Reggie Gold, one of the philosophical, pillars of the whole profession. He then went on to become the the president of the board of the American Chiropractic Neurology Board. So here you have someone who is trained in the absolute most, philosophical chiropractic, and then you have the supposedly two competing camps philosophically, two different boards, two different two different associations or whatever. He was the one person that had street cred in both. Absolutely. Like he could hold. I've never seen someone who can so quickly, charismatically just unite an entire crowd of different philosophies of chiropractic in one room in 1 hour, because he could speak to both with such depth. I'll give you just one metaphor. He said that the philosophy of chiropractic is the spine, but the ligaments and tendons and muscles that connect the spine together is the science. Is and you need both. And if you separate and splice out the two, you don't have a functioning system. So he I could talk about him for hours. I mean, he was able to explain things in a way, complex scientific and physiological processes that were so understandable. I mean, he figured out a way to teach X-ray. It was one of the most famous things he's done in the profession. Is he could teach X-ray diagnosis in a couple days, that like how to systematically go through an entire X-ray from start to finish and catch everything, and not have to like just glare at it for hours and like hope something pops out. I mean, I taught board reviews for him for about a year, including X-ray, and his system. I mean, I've met chiropractors from different parts of the world who studied with him, and they're still using his system into practice. In fact, I think in the Melbourne Chiropractic College, the radiology instructor there teaches his system to the students in Melbourne. So he also taught a clinical course called Y-Files, which went through his clinical practice. It wasn't just board reviews, but it's actually how to actually learn what his techniques were, how to not only communicate with patients, but how to integrate all these new technologies that were coming in that were enhancing the effects of chiropractic and filling in the gaps where chiropractic wasn't fully reaching. So, originally we have this debate in chiropractic, what is chiropractic? Is it adjusting, a la BJ Palmer, or is it trauma, toxins, and thoughts, a la DD Palmer? And Dr. D'Onofrio would use DD's model, but not to the exclusion, because some people just go into, nutrition, diet, stress, and all that, and kind of lean away from the spine. But Dr. D'Onofrio never do that. He said spine is absolutely a part of this, and we have to account for all these other things. And the reason why was based on his clinical practice and observation. Like Dr. Scott Walker, like Dr. Mortar, they noticed, these people who've been in practice for decades, noticed that the adjustment was becoming less effective over time because of the increased amount of toxins in the environment, stress in people's lives, and sleep deprivation, and the decay of the quality of food. So to have the adjustment be as effective as it used to be, you have to incorporate all these other modalities and including other technologies. So the adjustment is still center, but other pieces now have to be attended to. And he could say that from the philosophical and the scientific, both at the same time.
So what are some things that you're doing for your own personal health and your family's health?
Well, for my personal health, I lean heavily on testing. So I do lots of functional testing. I look at mitochondria, liver, adrenals, amino acids, fatty acids. And that's been, I still get adjusted once every 2 weeks, once every 3 weeks at most, at longest rather intervals. Like I still get adjusted. I exercise, I sleep, I have really high quality food, farmers markets, got a quarter cow. One of the cheapest way to get high quality meat is to just buy a quarter cow from a pasture fed, pasture finished farmer. And chest freezers are super cheap. I have impeccable quality food, and I do all the lifestyle things, but the biggest, newest piece is really incorporating testing. So it's genetics testing, functional testing. And from there, we no longer have to guess about what nutrients that you need. Like someone can take like amino acids. Like I just was taking some amino acids, but then I realized like I actually had a meaningful deficiency in glycine, which is critical for, gallbladder function, protein formation and all the major proteins, um, glutathione production, etc. Taking like 400 milligrams of glycine in a little powder isn't going to do jack to build up a massive deficiency. You have to put in like 3, 6, 9 grams of glycine over a period of about 6 months to help reconstitute. So I think testing is really the missing piece, at least in my life and in what I've seen in my clients' lives.
Well, I think it's really awesome that your journey has taken you to where you are today, from chiropractor to functional medicine practitioner.
Mm-hmm.
And I've gotten to know you over the past, month and a half. And we've had some meetings where we've both been able to, share our intention behind being in this profession and some of our skill sets. And it's been really awesome to get to know you. But I didn't know this. I didn't know that you wrote this book, Biohack Your Biohacking with the 10 Pillars of Health. Tell us a little bit about the book.
So it's an ebook available for free for anyone who wants to download it. It's at my website, drsamshay.com, drsamshay.com. And the book is right there on the homepage, or you can go to my website /biohacker. And what happened was that in chiropractic school, we learned about the triangle of health. And then while I was in Tri 2, I started taking the neurology modules through the Carrick Institute, which module 2, Tri 2 and starting neurology, that's rough. I don't recommend that to anybody. Get a bit more under your belt before being thrown into the deep end with neurology. But I saw that the triangle was a great genius model for 1895, but this is 2005. We're talking about 110 years later, and to tell someone now we're going to help you with your trauma, your thoughts, and your toxins is a little bit vague at this point because there's so many nuances to that. And so I started to take the triangle of health and expand it. So it's first started with putting neurology, or the brain, smack in the middle of the triangle. Because if you wanted a centerpiece of where the input of trauma, toxins, and thoughts ends up for a decision point, it'd be in the hypothalamus to decide whether or not, your body is under stress or otherwise. I mean, I learned about the hypothalamic component from Dr. James Chestnut, who was also a student of Dr. D'Onofrio. And that came directly from Dr. Chestnut. I asked him directly, who are your two main, who are the two main influences? And he just looked right at me in kind of his intense way he looks at people. And he said, Dr. D'Onofrio, Dr. Murphy. And a long silence to just make it very clear those are the only two people that he really encourages people to study under, and or at least this was in 2006 or 5, or when I met Dr. Chestnut. So we have the brain in the middle and then the triangle around it. And then I realized that the triangles, each corner of the triangle it's a bit vague. So I spliced each corner into 3 components. So the physical corner, trauma, I split into 3 different physical components. There's bowel, in terms of digestion, which is kind of homage to Dr. Jensen. The physical body, which would be spine, people who have injuries, chronic or acute, bad dental work will ruin anyone's life, poor posture. It's just the physical body. I've also put genetics in there. Why I put genetics in body? Because identical twins have the same body because of their genetics. So genetics goes in body. Then the next pillar is burst, or exercise or movement. So bowel, body, and burst exercise. Those are all physical. And then the biochemical corner, or the chemical corner of the triangle, I split into biotoxins, bionutrients, and breakfast. So the biotoxins is self-explanatory. It's all the toxic things that interfere with physiology. Bionutrients is everything we metabolize for the benefit of our physiology, and that includes sunlight and oxygen because we metabolize those 2 things. And then breakfast came out of clinical experience with patients when I had a hands-on practice for 8 years when I lived in New Zealand. And I noticed that 99% of my chronically ill patients had had skipped breakfast, had sugar only, coffee only, or had glorified processed sugars called, processed grains. And I know a lot of people here freaking out, say, what do you mean we should be skipping breakfast because intermittent fasting is amazing? And I'm like, intermittent fasting is great. I just don't think you should skip breakfast. I think you should skip dinner, because if you don't eat breakfast, your cortisol levels keep going up, up, and up, because your body is still needing to ensure you have proper blood sugar, and cortisol is the way your body maintains it if it's not eating anything. So I think that if people want to do intermittent fasting, they should skip dinner, not breakfast. But that's a whole other discussion. But I noticed that chronically ill patients had bad breakfasts and bad routines. So that pillar is breakfast and routines, which is a splicing out from the chemical corner of the triangle. And then the last corner, thoughts in the triangle of health, I spliced into bothers, which is a word for stress, bugs or hidden infections, and bedtime. So dealing with stressors, dealing with hidden infections, which includes gut infections, mold, and then sleep or bedtime. Now, and that became the 10 pillars of health: brain in the middle, bowel, pillar number 2, body, pillar number 3, burst exercise, pillar number 4. I'm a big fan of alliteration, so they're all B's. Pillar 5 is biotoxins. Pillar 6 is bionutrients. Pillar 7 is breakfast and routines. Pillar 8 is bothers and stress. Pillar 9 is bugs and hidden infections. And pillar 10 is bedtime and sleep. Why is bugs in the emotional corner? Well, when people get sick, it affects their mood. And I also wanted to make the point to splice out bowel from infections because of the mold issue. I lived in New Zealand, which is kind of mold central because we're a little island surrounded by water on all 4 sides. Mold is a huge issue, and I didn't want to camp infections exclusively in the gut because it's just simply untrue. There's other infections that are airborne, as we all know from the past year and a half. There's more than just infections in the gut. So that's the 10 pillars of health. And I called it Biohack Your Biohacking because what I found with people who are life extension enthusiasts, biohackers, human potential people, longevity, stop the clock people, whatever the term is for these aspirational health enthusiasts, I found them getting overzealous on like one pillar or 2 or 3. Like it's all about this nootropic supplement, or it's all about this meditation technique, or it's all about, this goji berry juice you squirt up your nose or whatever, or sleep optimization. And they don't have the map of the territory of looking at all 10 different influences on health. And they're spending 80% of their time to get the last 5% of one pillar, as opposed to examining every pillar and seeing what pillar has crumbled down to 20% and put 80% of your effort there, as opposed to putting 80% of your effort into the last 5% of one pillar. So if you biohack your biohacking is a way to say, look at the big picture first, know what pillar or pillars to focus on, then you can bring in whatever tools and tactics you have. And one of the best tactics out there is functional testing. So for people that are wanting to waste so much money on fancy supplements, and they don't actually know if they need that thing or not. And the best investment people can make, aside from looking at the 10 pillars in detail and identifying what pillars to focus on, is to focus on testing so that you actually are doing the things your body's actually needing. And so that's what the book covers. It covers the 10 pillars in detail, and it covers the different types of functional tests that map onto each pillar.
That sounds pretty useful. So where do you see chiropractic going in the next 20 years or so?
I see it splintering into those that into people who are very dedicated to hands only, and those that are using technology, and to those that are using other modalities like we just discussed, like nutrition or cold light laser or rehab or whatever it may be. I think it's going to be a schism, which is going to be really accentuated by the advance of technology. And I think that I mean, I wish Uncle John was alive, because he was one of the few voices that could really unify based on both philosophical and scientific principles. And the the people who are hands only will accuse people of losing their philosophical roots in exchange for glowy technology, and the people who are looking at these advanced technologies, like, wait, these are ways that can increase capacity to help the public. And it's fundamentally coming down to where you define chiropractic philosophy. Are you in D.D.'s camp of trauma, toxins, and thoughts, or are you in B.J.'s camp of spine only? And I know I'm simplifying a lot, but those are the two basic camps. I understand why B.J. went spine only in order to maintain the distinctiveness of the profession when it was under high assault, during starting in 1910 all the way up through the oh my God, I can't believe I'm blanking on the name of that court case against the AMA.
The Wilk case.
Look, yeah, that one. So my like, chiropractic has been under assault, and it makes sense why to trim the focus down to spine only when BJ was in charge. I understand that, and the roots of chiropractic were the triangle, and I think we have to do what D'Onofrio did, which is keep the spine, but go back and incorporate all the things that Didi was talking about. And I, false modesty aside, expanded on Didi's triangle to make it much more specific and updated for the 21st century. And if we can just do that, like spine plus all these other things, that's, I think, where the profession should go. Again, it's kind of self-referential to talk about my own model as the future of chiropractic, but that's based off of Didi, and it's based off of what I learned from Uncle John.
Just tell us a miracle story that you've seen in your office over the years.
The term, I'm actually going to push back on the term miracle story, and it's going to end up in a good place, but I'm going to push back on the term miracle story. I never really liked it, and the reason why is that, to me, it put chiropractic sometimes in the realm of the spooky. And to me, the more I studied science, physiology, neurology, the more logical and straightforward these quote unquote miracle stories were. And I think that the future of chiropractic is not in, creating, endless lists of testimonies from a magic adjustment and everything resolving. I think the future of chiropractic is saying, with that same adjustment, supported by nutrition, diet, stress reduction, all the rest of it, sleep, we now understand how wondrous the human body is to self-correct, self-heal, and the innate intelligence of the body. I've always been leery of miracle stories, because sometimes the miracle stories, the credit is not given to the patient's own innate intelligence, their own body's innate intelligence, but the credit was given to the chiropractor. So it created this kind of weird, like, martyr, savior, God complex in clinicians. And the more, it's kind of like what Einstein said, live where everything is a miracle or nothing is a miracle. And I think I really want the profession to go towards where nothing is a miracle, because we understand what's going on. And I've had plenty of quote unquote miracle stories, but it's not because I'm miraculous. It's because I did the proper assessments. Like, okay, they need to have this type of physical help with their spine or whatever else, their physical body, their structure. This help with their mental, emotional space, and this help with their nutritional and detox space, and improve their sleep, their lifestyle, their community, where they are in their family ecosystem, etc. And it's not a miracle. We ultimately just want miracles to become common sense, and more importantly, common practice.
Well, I love this episode, 274 of the Chiro Hustle podcast. Dr. Sam, you are a wealth of knowledge. I appreciate your lexicon and your ability to piece together the non-miracle and the miracle. And
Yeah.
that is adaptation. And as people realize that with good practitioners and people that take protecting the sacred trust as a responsibility, you do get adaptation through correction of the things that you're talking about, these 10 pillars. And a lot of this goes into uh, the epigenetic zone of choosing your environment and choosing your health and changing your behavior and changing your life. And I think that as we get to talk more and more, we're going to learn so much more from each other. And appreciate you once again being our guest on the Chiro Hustle podcast. And is there anything that we didn't ask you today that you'd like to share with our audience?
One of the best ways that people, clinicians listening to this, one of the most important things you can do for improving the outcomes for the people that you serve, as well as improving your marketing and your business, is become more likable. And I'm being technical when I say that. Be likable. And this was something I learned from Dr. James Wilson, who was the gentleman who coined the term adrenal fatigue. He's got like 3 master's degrees and 2 doctorates. I mean, the guy's just super crazy smart. He said that patients are looking for 3 things. Are you available? Are you likable? And are you capable? And the likable bit was really interesting because I read an article on the placebo effect, and it basically came, I think it was in 2019, and they said basically came down to, do you like and trust your doctor? Which made total sense, because if you really dislike the person you're taking advice from, any type of treatment plan, adjustment, supplement, or what exercise or whatever, anytime you think of it, you're going to have this emotional association to that person who recommended it, and you're going to have a cortisol response. So your results will hit a cortisol tinged glass ceiling. Whereas if you really like and know and trust your clinician, then you will have a over beneficial response, because you'll have the opposite of a cortisol response. And it finally explained to me why I've met some truly profoundly mediocre clinicians, profoundly mediocre, who have disproportionately good results because they're so damn likable. And at the same time, I've met geniuses whose protocols just glow, but they have the personality of a doorstop, and they don't get the results that they should. And it's the likability piece. So I take stand-up comedy. Like I have people want to laugh. You know, I've got on my YouTube channel, I've got a stand-up comedy playlist of stuff that I do. I do a mean David Attenborough, you know, narrating a National Geographic special inside a Boulder coffee shop. You know, like there's all, I do stand-up comedy to become more, develop a higher EQ, because it's for the benefit of my clients. Because if they don't like me, that affects their cortisol levels, and they're not going to get as well as they could or should. So if you want to build your practice, like, technically speaking, become more likable, not syrupy, not false, but like genuine, warm, engaging. And that's going to help your practice more than anything. And you'll also have a happier life.
And that's called relationship equity.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Shay, thank you very much for being our guest today. This was a very insightful episode, and
Thank you.
we want you to enjoy the rest of your afternoon, okay?
We will, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. And thank you so much, Jim and Luke. I appreciate what you're doing, giving a voice to a chiropractic profession by interviewing those of us on the ground. I never thought that there would be a space like this to interview chiropractors from around the world. It's so effortlessly available and scalable. So thank you for what you're doing.
Well, it's our honor. And as being non-chiropractors, we do take it very seriously, protecting the sacred trust and weaving these stories together to document the future of where the profession is headed. So thank you for being a part of our tapestry. And with that being said, I know we have drsamshay.com as a resource. Is there any other resource where people can find you on the internet space?
The best is the website. But they can also put Dr. Sam Shay into iTunes podcasts or into YouTube. And I've got 80 videos there. I talk about functional medicine. I talk about functional genetics. I have my stand-up comedy. I talk about a whole stress reduction. I talk about a whole bunch of stuff on there. And there's longer form podcasts on specific topics, whether it's genetics or gut health or the ion panel or mitochondria or whatever. So I'm pretty transparent. I also have stuff on addiction as well, because I have a model on helping addiction that is a whole topic for another discussion.
All right, Dr. Sam, thanks for being our guest today, and we'll make sure that we get your resources on the branding for the episode.
Okay, thanks so much.
All right, talk to you
See ya.
soon.